Hello, this is the first lecture in the fourth module, and this module is on Satan primarily, and also some catch-up work on demons. This first lecture is on Satan, particularly Satan in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, and then the one after this is Satan in the New Testament, and then there's a short lecture, a catch-up on demons, particularly looking at evil spirits in the Old Testament. The first thing I'd like to draw to your attention is Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And Paul is speaking about, what are we using our minds for? What are we using our heart for, our soul for? And he said, use them for good things. Meditate on what is good. But of course, in this lecture, we're thinking about what is evil, and there is a place for that, but it shouldn't be our main game, our main focus by any means. And probably for that reason, the Bible doesn't say everything that we might sometimes like to know about Satan and about evil. There's lots of questions. We don't really know how Satan became evil, for example. That's not explained. Nor is the structure of Satan's hosts, his minions, his demons. We don't know their hierarchies and how they're organized or whatever. So there's lots we don't know, and we don't need to know. Like, we need to know enough. We have enough that we need to know, which is in the scriptures. And so we'll be looking at that and drawing that together. But this is my advice to you. Think about what is good. So maybe after listening to these lectures, you should go and think about something good and beautiful. Satan is one of the three major theological developments in the New Testament, new things that are barely there in the Old Testament, but become major in the New Testament. One is the Holy Spirit, which is mentioned in the Old Testament, but gets elaborated in the New. Another is the idea of God as Father, which is central in the New Testament, but only touched on a number of times in the Old Testament. And then there's Satan, who is mentioned a few times, but there's a whole theology of Satan in the New Testament. And each of these three aspects of Christian theology are front and central in all the four Gospels, not just Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and also in the writings of the apostles as well. So Satan's one of the major shifts. And I think the demons sort of go along with Satan in that sense. They're also elaborated in the New Testament. Now, not every Christian believes in Satan, and some find Satan a rather unpleasant thing to have to think about. I remember once I was working in a church in which another staff person was taking a baptism, and I noticed that in the rite, the baptism ritual that had been prepared, there's a part of the Anglican baptism rite where you renounce Satan. I renounce Satan, all his works. And in this particular service, this pastor had taken out that section. And I said, you've taken that out. It's very interesting. Why are you doing that? And this person said, well, the family finds it really awkward, unpleasant. We don't want to have to engage with that. And I thought, I'm not sure that's a great idea to kind of turn away from the reality of the need to renounce evil. But there are some Christians who actually do away with Satan altogether. Friedrich Schleiermacher, quite a significant Protestant theologian, said that the idea of the devil that's developed among us is so unstable that we cannot expect anyone to be convinced of its truth. No reasonable person would ever believe in Satan, basically, he's saying. And then Walter Wink has written some significant and influential books on structural evil in society and institutions. He said the tendency of some Christians to regard Satan as unambiguously evil breeds a paranoid view of reality. Perhaps in the final analysis, Satan is not even a personality at all, but rather a function in the divine process, a dialectical movement in God's purpose, which becomes evil only when humanity breaks off the dialectic by refusing creative choice. Now, this is a very good example of what I call theological mumbo-jumbo. But I think what he's saying is that Satan is not real as a personality, but as an idea, Satan is quite useful. And we actually, as human beings, need to face the reality of our moral choices. And it's when we give up on making those choices that we make up the idea of an evil Satan. He becomes our scapegoat. So basically he's saying, we use the idea of Satan as escapism. I think that's what he's saying, to try and de-mumbo-jumbo-fy his theology. So Some theologians, some Christians don't believe in Satan. I do. I'm a great believer in the Bible. And in the Bible, Satan is a real being. Some of the attributes of Satan, we would say that Satan is personal. What that mean? Well, what does that mean? Well, Satan is not a force, and Satan's not a function in the divine process either. He's a creature. He's an active agent with intentions, intelligence, purpose, plans, and also capacity for communication. So these are attributes of a personal being. He is a spirit, described as a spirit, incorporeal, that is without a body, but nevertheless able to be located in space. Satan can enter people. That's said of Judas, although that does call for some interpretation. What does it mean that Satan entered Judas? Clearly it means he influenced him. Perhaps it was actually a demon that did the entering. Perhaps it means he came under Satan's power. We don't have enough information to know. But this is the same language that's used of demons entering people. So this is a big intrusion, isn't it, into Judas's life. And Judas has apparently opened himself up for that. And perhaps Satan entered the serpent in Genesis 3, and that's why the serpent plays that role. Perhaps it's the Satan speaking through the animal. There are suggestions, and this is the standard view in Christian theology, that Satan is a fallen angel. So in Job 1:6, it says the sons of God come into the divine council with God. And this is a term that's used in the Hebrew scriptures for angels, and Satan shows up in that council, so he seems to be one of the sons of God, that is the angels. And also Revelation 12:9 speaks of Satan and his angels, so these can only be the demons that are under his authority. So this suggests that Satan and the demons actually are angels, fallen angels, but the Bible doesn't actually explain for us how that fall happened. How did Satan become evil? And the normal interpretation is that it was a rebellion. We'll come back to this idea later on in the talk. What is interesting is that in the scriptures, Satan never takes on a physical form. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but you do have angels showing up with physical forms, and also theophanies, God showing up in the Hebrew scriptures, and also, of course, in Jesus Christ in human form. But it's interesting that that doesn't happen with Satan. Well, let's consider the names and the titles of Satan. They're very important names. The names of God tell us what God is like, and the names of Satan also reflect that. So in Hebrew, the name Satan comes from a Hebrew verb, satan, which means to accuse or to act as an adversary to oppose. And the title, Satan, is normally in the form ha-satan, the accuser. And Zechariah 3:1 has both those words. It has the accuser who does accusing. They go together. And it's interesting that sometimes in the Hebrew scriptures, you couldn't be quite certain whether to translate an expression as the accuser or as Satan. You can't tell the difference. The Hebrew was translated into Greek as hodiabolos, and this comes from a word meaning to throw across. Dia is through, and bolo is to throw. So it's throwing something at you. So this is and it's a term in Greek. It was a term used for slandering somebody. So he is the slanderer, the accuser. It's really just as literal as possible, a translation of ha-satan, the accuser. And we get our word devil from the Greek diabolos as well, I think, ultimately. So it carries across a similar meaning. He's the one who accuses, he opposes. Now, there are other names and titles. Again, let's look at a few of the sort of titles. We have Beelzebul, which Jesus calls Satan in Matthew and in Luke. This is from the Hebrew Beelzebub or Beelzebub, the Lord of Fly, exactly what it literally means. And 2 Kings 1:2 says that this was the name of the god of Ekron, a Philistine city. So it was a deity of the Philistines. That can't be a good thing, I think. And another term that's used in 2 Corinthians 6:15, Paul calls Satan's Belial, which means in Hebrew the worthless one. So that must have been a term that was used by Jews at that time to refer to Satan. I should say, by the way, although Satan's not mentioned a lot in the Old Testament, he appears a lot more in that sort of apocryphal literature, Jewish literature around that time. A very common expression for Satan in the New Testament is the evil one. That's used many times. That's quite striking how frequently it's used. There are other titles as well: the enemy in Matthew, the adversary in 1 Peter, the deceiver in Revelation, the great dragon, a kind of monstrous serpent figure in Revelation 2, the father of lies, murderer in John, the prince of demons. That's a really interesting title because it implies that Satan is a ruler over other spirits who are under his sway. And this is actually a talking point for Jesus with the Pharisees, Satan's authority over demons. He's also called the prince of this world, so he has authority over this world as opposed to the kingdom of God. The ruler of the kingdom of the air. Evil spirits were believed to exist in the air, in the heavens, in the sky, and so Satan is the lord of this air, kingdom of the air, which means of the spirit realm. He's also called the spirit at work in those who are disobedient, so those who are rebellious are motivated by Satan. He's called the god of this age. This is sort of interchangeable in meaning, a similar meaning to the prince of this world. This age is this world that's passing away. He also is said to masquerade as an angel of light. Now, what we're going to do now is look at some Old Testament passages. And the first one we're going to look at is Genesis 3, the story of the fall. You might like to read through that. Actually, just take a moment to do that before you continue with the video. It's very interesting that the serpent is not specifically identified as Satan in Genesis 3, or actually anywhere else specifically in the Bible. But Revelation 20 speaks about Satan as that ancient serpent. So that's a suggestion that this is the serpent of Genesis 3. Well, what's this serpent like? He's crafty. He's pretty tricky. And his craftiness consists of challenging God's words. Did God really say that? And he tells lies. You will not certainly die. He causes Eve to doubt not only God's word, but also God himself. He plants seeds of doubt about the integrity and character of God in Eve. So he says, God knows you'll be like God. God hasn't told you the full truth. You know, it's not at all what God has said to you. And he tempts Eve by really doing a tear in her relationship with God. He attacks her relationship with God, and that's the way Satan works. And it's interesting that in verses 14 to 15, God addresses the serpent, as an animal. He says things about the animalness of the serpent, but in the curses there in verses 14 and 15. But he also says things that could be understood as a reference to Satan. And this is sometimes considered to be a messianic prophecy. It's sometimes called the proto-gospel, the kind of original gospel. And this is when God says, I will put hatred or enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise its heel. So one way of interpreting this is that the offspring, which is male offspring in Hebrew, is none other than Jesus Christ. So there's enmity between Satan and between the Messiah. And they will both come under assault. You know, Satan will be challenged and attacked by the offspring of the woman, and the offspring of the woman will come under assault as well. And but it seems as though the offspring of the woman will get the better of it, because his heel might be bruised, but he will bruise the head of the serpent, which looks like he'll get the better of the encounter. And so this is a prophetic anticipation of the crushing of Satan under the feet of the church and under the feet of Christ. It's an anticipation of the defeat of Satan on the cross. Calvin said that God might revive the fainting minds of men. It became necessary to promise them in their posterity victory over Satan. So what he's saying is that this curse that is spoken of Satan being bruised under the heel of the offspring of the woman is actually a promise of victory over Satan. But notice also the devastation in the story of the fall, what happens as a result of it. There's death that comes upon the man and the woman when they're evicted from the Garden of Eden. The environment is a source of pain and suffering because of the hard labour that's needed, and the soil reluctantly only gives its produce. There is pain involved, a pain in childbirth, pain in labour, hard work for the man. And there's damage too to male and female relationships that you can read in Genesis 3 as well. There's the curse of men dominating over women. So the anticipation that we know, we can read this in retrospect, is that the work of the serpent to damage the life of Adam and Eve will be reversed through the second Adam that comes, and he will indeed crush Satan and defeat him through the cross. So there's hope in the curses of the fall. Now let's look at other passages in the Old Testament that refer to Satan. There's 1 Chronicles 21:1 where Satan is mentioned, and it says that Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. That's in 1 Chronicles 21. It's interesting, in 2 Samuel 24, verse 1, it's a parallel passage. It just says the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, go and take a census. And it's interesting that the authors of Chronicles changed that, and they say that it was Satan that incited David, perhaps because in the context it was an evil thing that David did. So anyway, that's interesting. So this is also interesting because in this particular passage, it just says Satan, whereas in the other two passages we're going to look at, it refers to the Satan, the accuser. And that's the case in Zechariah 3 and in Job 1-2. So in Zechariah 3, verses, it's actually 3 verses 1-2, not 1-12. It's very interesting. It says that the prophet has this vision, and he sees Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan is standing on the side, and he's accusing Joshua, speaking ill of Joshua, undermining Joshua. He's the slanderer, remember, the accuser, the opponent. And God rebukes Satan. The Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who's chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire? So God is saying, I've got my hand on this man. You shut up, Satan. You've got nothing to do with him. And God intervenes and speaks against him. And it's interesting later in James, this is used as a model of how to deal with Satan. But then we've got the book of Job, which is really the most complex and interesting appearance of the person of Satan in the Old Testament. So one day the sons of God came to present themselves. We believe they're the angelic hosts in the heavenly court, heavenly council. An idea that's mentioned a number of times in the scriptures, that the heavenly beings gather around the Lord. So one day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? And Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth in it. And that's quite interesting because it means that Satan is locatable in space. He's not omnipresent. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And then Satan says, does Job fear God for nothing? He's getting lots of rewards for his fearing God. He's doing very well by it, thank you very much. Haven't you put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? And that's quite interesting. God has been protecting Job. You've blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and surely he will curse you to his face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. And then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So we learn a number of things from this. One is that Satan is not omnipresent. He's not everywhere. He's also not omniscient. He doesn't know everything, and that's why he's roaming the earth to check things out. He's physically locatable and presumably only knows what he can experience directly or what's been told to him. He's a seeker of information, actually. It's an interesting question, if Satan's not omnipresent and not omniscient, he doesn't know everything, he's not everywhere, how is he so responsible for all the evil in the world and the temptations that people experience? We speak about Satan as if he was everywhere sometimes, but the Bible doesn't say that. And I think the answer to that question is he's got lots of help. He's got lots of demons to help him. Don't underestimate the extent of Satan's helpers. So, we see here that Satan's power to harm Job is given by God. And in giving that delegated power, God has also set limits upon it. And we see that in chapters 1 and 2. So in chapters 1, Satan has the power to destroy everything that belongs to Job. He loses his family, his possessions. And then he is, in the second round, Satan is given permission to act against Job's body, and he becomes, infected with boils and physically afflicted as well. So each time Satan works with the permission of God, but the malevolence, the evil intent, is all Satan's. That's quite clear. It's not that God is trying to damage Job at all. Well, there are two other passages I'd like to draw your attention to, and I really encourage you to look these up and read them, actually. Ezekiel 28, 12 to 19, they're quite longish passages, and Isaiah 14, 12 to 15. Ezekiel 28, verses 12 to 19, refers to the king of Tyre, but the text couldn't only just refer to a man. It seems to have another target in mind as well. So verse 13 says of this splendid figure, "You were in Eden, the garden of God." It also says that he was created blameless, which is kind of surprising for a human being, and that then wickedness was found in you. And then it says he was thrown down to the earth, which is language that's used by Jesus of Satan and also in Revelation as well. This passage, although it refers to the king of Tyre, seems to also point to someone beyond the king of Tyre whose bio looks a lot like Satan's. And then we've got Isaiah 14. Again, this time it's about the king of Babylon. "How you've fallen from heaven, the morning star." In Latin, that's the word Lucifer. This is where Lucifer comes from, the son of the dawn. "You've been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit." Well, this passage refers to the sin of pride, wanting to be like God. And it's a rebellious sin. And it has been taken by some theologians as an origin story for Satan. And indeed, it does seem to point beyond the king of Babylon. It's possible in these two passages that you've got a double meaning. You've got the king of Tyre and the king of Babylon as a kind of the front end of the prophecy, but behind them is standing the source of evil, which they embody, and that is Satan himself. So this is why I think it's a long theological tradition, Christian theological tradition, of seeing these two figures as descriptions of Satan, and out of this you get the idea of Satan as like clothed in light and very beautiful and attractive. This comes from this passage as well, and you can see echoes of that in some of the comments in the New Testament. Well, this concludes our first lecture in this module on Satan in the Old Testament.